Hey y'all, welcome to the T-Work podcast, hosted by Grant Banko and me, Adam Moreau. From entrepreneurs and athletes to the rat racers of corporate America and those who refuse to be put in a box, we want to share their stories and understand how they ended up where they are. Success and development come in many shapes and sizes. We want to hear about it all. So grab a drink and pull up a seat. Let's spill some tea and get to
Welcome back to the T Work podcast. Today, our guest is Tyler Kania. He has been a rugby player, um, dealt with bipolar disorder, has a book about his life that he wants to get into today, and we're happy to learn about it. He also, during his rugby career, had two knee injuries, but I don't want to butcher and tell his story for him, so I'm going to pass it over to you, Tyler. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, I'll be a little brief, but my background is pretty robust in terms of the vocations I've held and the things that make me me. But I was a rugby player, a rugby coach, a cybersecurity salesman, a stonemason, a crypto entrepreneur, a politician, a painter, and a writer. So I've kind of done it all. When you're bipolar, you have the need to kind of reinvent yourself. You might do something really well for a couple of years, but a manic episode can kind of, shoot you right in the foot. And so I've had to adapt, and I'm proud of it. I'm proud of all the skills that I've learned. But I've suffered quite a bit in my life. I've had two suicide attempts. I've been institutionalized. And I also, I'm probably the only person you've ever met that's ruptured both of their patellar tendons. It's when your knee goes into your quad. It happens once for every 147,000 human years. So to do it twice, it's kind of like discovering life on other planets.
I did not know that statistic. Adam might have just because of his career and study of the body and working with injuries. But also to give people a perspective on how many vocations you've had. You're also only 32 years old. So to be in that many different areas in that short amount of time is very impressive. I'm kind of curious just right off the bat, which one was your, kind of like your longest tenure of which vocation did you spend the most time in before switching to something else?
Um, well, rugby is what I'm most passionate about. I had ambitions to play at the highest level. I'm a fly half, which means, I'm kind of like the quarterback. I'm in charge of the offense, the passing, the kicking, communication. But when I ruptured my patellar tendon for the first time, that was my first manic episode, and I quit rugby for 4.5 years. Um, threw all that away, and then, after a suicide attempt, I found my way back into the game in a pretty unpredictable fashion. I just went to watch a game, and somehow I ended up on the field and assisted the game-winning try, and that sent me back into the game. I ended up coaching a college women's rugby team to a conference championship after that. And, rugby's kind of been a big part of my life ever since. I live for the community. I live for the way it makes me feel when I play. I live for the goals. Besides that, on and off, I've been in the cybersecurity industry for 9 years. I found a lot of success in it at an early age. I was making $250,000 when I was 26. But because of my illness, I've burned very many bridges, and it's been tough to be able to find someone in my network that's willing to give me a chance at this point. Thankfully, I think I have something lined up relatively soon. But yeah, rugby and cybersecurity are the two longest tenures. Everything else, has kind of been a flash in the pan. I'm hoping that writing is something that I'm going to do for the rest of my life. It's like therapy to me. I know that I'm good at it. And I'm creative, and I love just making things to bring emotion out of my reader. So I'm committed to writing for the long term for sure.
Thankfully, the skills of writing or the demands of writing really shouldn't deteriorate, much like your knees in rugby.
Yeah. Well, as far as writing goes, it's like, you can take away my job because I'm manic. You can take away my paycheck because I made a mistake. But who is going to take my pen away, right? I started writing out of necessity because, I had nothing else to turn to. I had burned so many bridges that it was like I have to work for myself and I have to figure this out. And I'm really glad I did.
When did you first start writing? And I guess you said out of necessity you had to start. So how good were you at it, or was it a long haul to get to where you are today with your writing skills?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I spent 2020 and a lot of 2021 unemployed, and I was very depressed. I didn't want to be in my world, so I started reading. I started reading 300 pages a day. It was a full-time job. I read Infinite Jest, the most difficult English language book, in under 2 weeks. I read all kinds of epics, and that year really gave me the foundation to become a writer. I didn't have ambitions at that point to write or anything like that. Um, but what happened was, after I was institutionalized in the fall of 2022, I started to get my life back together. I got a job at the largest cybersecurity company in the world, and I was working hard to get back on the rugby field. But my second game of the season last spring, I ruptured my patellar tendon for the second time. And I stayed awake for 3 straight nights because I'm a substance abuser and my parents didn't want me taking painkillers. And so I went manic again. And mania can be a strong, powerful force that can make you no longer care about what other people think. It can make you feel righteous and feel like you can achieve anything. It gives you incredible, productivity. And basically, I just opened up the Notes app on my iPhone, and I had never been someone who had shared my life on social media. But during that manic episode, I felt the need to explain myself to everyone I had confused in my life. And so I just started publishing my life story on Instagram. And, I ended up, making some mistakes because of the mania, and I was hospitalized. Had a terrible experience in the hospital system where, a nurse just didn't understand how to treat a manic episode. So I was locked in a room for hours, shitting and pissing myself because I was immobile because of my knee. And, it was a terrible experience. But when I got out, I had all this feedback from friends, from rugby players, from strangers, people that suffer with mental illness. Like everyone was pouring in support, for what I had written on Instagram. And, once that mania kind of subsided, I was like, all right, well, I really have something here. And, fortunately or unfortunately, that manic episode caused me to lose my job in cybersecurity, which was a blessing because I was able to spend the next 8 months working full time on my book. And so it never would have became what it was without that. But I'm definitely like that was the first ever manic episode I've had that ended up in, success. Right. Every other time it has completely shattered my life. So um I'm really proud that I was able to make it work.
I want to step back using Banko's words. He's all about stepping back here and giving context to things. But uh, dealing with mental illness can be extremely difficult, of course, for you. And then even looking beyond the self, I know it adds additional guilt, struggle, or turmoil when you look at the loved ones around you. So I'm curious, maybe if you can offer where you first discovered there might be something different that you were dealing with, or that you and your family were able to acknowledge this for the first time, and where did maybe care begin? And then later on in the process, I know a lot of this comes down to how do you deal with it for you, not how does the institution as a whole or mental health as a whole deal with it. But it sounds like writing has enabled you to take on a new path, or like give you a somewhat of a cure in a sense. Like I don't want to minimize this, but
Yeah.
it's giving you an outlet to deal with it. So maybe how have you dealt with it for the long haul? When did this first start rearing its ugly head in a sense for you? Way back when?
Yeah. Well, typically, bipolar is really difficult to diagnose because it doesn't usually manifest until your mid 20s. The first symptom I showed, the week of my first ever game as the captain of my college rugby team, I got arrested for breaking down a door at a sorority house, and I was charged with felony burglary. And, it was tough at that point because it was like, well, is he just a rambunctious college kid, or is there something behind the cards here? And, it wasn't until, 2 or 3 years later that I had that manic episode and, quit my six-figure job, quit rugby, was broken up with, moved to Idaho, traveled across the country for, months and months trying to just find distractions from the mental prison that I was in. And, for the next 7, 8 years, it was me just going on adventures and trying to avoid asking for help, thinking that I could handle it myself. Um, until it got really bad where like, I kept a rope in my room and I was having illusions of myself hanging from a tree every time I would walk my dog and, overdosing on medication and being hospitalized for that. And then finally being institutionalized where, they formally diagnosed me with bipolar. They gave me lithium, which has saved my life. They gave me antipsychotics, which have made me a happier person. Um, but more important than that, the experience in the mental health hospital made me feel fortunate for all of my blessings, right? Like I come from a wealthy, educated, nuclear white family. I'm athletic, good looking, and have wit, right? And, most of the people that I was institutionalized with were suffering far worse than me. They might have schizophrenia or narcissism, or my roommate had aphasia, which is when you have a difficult time speaking. I got him to speak for the first time in several weeks, and we formed a friendship. And I kind of realized that, like, none of these guys are going to be able to speak up for themselves, right? They're all ashamed. They don't have the resources. Um, and it's only going to be more and more stigmatized unless someone steps to the plate and says, this is what mental illness is. This is how we've been treated in society. This is what it's like to lose your freedom by going to an institution, right? You don't go outside when you're institutionalized. You don't have activities. There's no niceties. They don't try and heal you. They try and stabilize your condition so that you're not a threat to anyone or yourself. Um, in outpatient therapy, that's where you heal. You have group therapy where you talk to people who are a little farther along. Like when you're inpatient, people aren't talking at all, really. Everyone's too traumatized. But, when you're in group therapy, you can relate to people and you can hear their story. Um, and so that was a really powerful experience to me. And, since then I've kind of come up with the recipe that worked for me. And let me first say that like I'm never gonna not have this illness. It's a lifelong thing. I'm stable right now, but I'm not suicidal, but I think about suicide every single day, right? It's a flashing thought. I'm always going to be a substance abuser. I'm always going to struggle with depression. But a lot of people kind of look up to me for what I've put out there into the world. And, I feel like it's my responsibility to live up to their expectations. It's a burden to hold, but it's worth it to make people feel less lonely and to make the general public understand, this whole thing a little bit better. But as far as like, sorry, the three things that you kind of need, to that worked for me, finding a community, people that you can trust and that you can spend time with, finding a goal that keeps you motivated to wake up every morning and better yourself. And then the last thing is, medication and therapy. And, those things are tough. Psychiatric illnesses are really difficult to prescribe medication for. It's kind of like a needle in a haystack. I filtered through about 14 different medications, and some had really bad side effects. One medication, it was a early stage trial antipsychotic I took. It made me gay for 3 months, and I've never been gay in my life. And that was really traumatic. But when I did finally find the medications that worked for me, um, it made me feel like what took so long to get help, Tyler, you know? But I'm really fortunate that I finally did.
I was actually, I mean, I'm glad you added that to the end of it, because that probably would have been one of our questions of kind of what helped you and what you do now. But I was just going to jump in and sort of congratulate you for how far you've come, and the fact that you are speaking up for this community and giving people someone to relate to, that a lot of people that probably struggle with this in their life in many different ways don't have anybody that is out there to relate to have someone that understands. So I just want to commend you for that, for speaking up, writing the book, um, and giving awareness. I think a lot of people think that, oh, you just take this pill and you're fixed, and they don't realize that medications hit people differently, and there isn't a one size fits all. So there is a lot of trial and error in this situation. People think, oh, it's this disease or this disorder, and this is the fix and you're done. And it's definitely more of a journey. And I think giving that perspective is great. So I want to commend you on that. I want to understand, going back to the institutionalization initially, because from my understanding and seeing some people go through that, there's a lot of pushback in actually wanting to do that. What was your process and experience like going into the institution? Was that voluntary, involuntary? What did that process look like for you?
Yeah, so to back up a little, I had mentioned that I was the head coach of a college women's rugby team that had all this success. We won our championship. It had been years since I had found like human connection like that. And, I really felt like I had found my thing in life. I really, I was 29, so I was about 8 or 9 years older than most of the girls I was coaching. Um, and as we found success, like I started to look at them as friends. I worked really hard for the program. I quit a job and worked full-time coaching, getting them prepared, film, play calling, you know, prepping practice. I bought them $3,000 worth of equipment out of my pocket because cryptocurrencies were doing really well. And, I felt really good about it. And then during the off season, I tried to start a crypto startup, basically a decentrally owned and operated rugby team. And I pitched it to all these venture capitalists in the largest crypto conference in America. And, I was manic while I was doing it, totally manic, out of my mind. But like I said, that can be powerful when you're pitching an idea to like venture capitalists or something like that. And so I left that conference thinking that I was about to change the world, right? I was having those grandiose thoughts because I was manic. Um, I thought I was going to get a 7-figure line of credit, a seed round for my startup. And I went home. I trusted this guy on the internet with the secret phrase to my cryptocurrency wallet because I was manic. I just wasn't thinking. And he stole $450,000 from me. The next day, I show up to coach the women's rugby team, and I'm still manic. I'm self-medicating, and I'm yelling at them for the first time ever. What I didn't know was that their former coach was trying to organize a coup to get his position back, and I ended up losing that job. And from there, I was suicidally depressed for a long time. Eventually, that depression gave way to a manic episode where I just got in my car, drove south. I played for the Nashville rugby team for a week because my college roommate was playing for them. And, from there, I went to Memphis where I got a job coaching the Memphis Inner City Youth Rugby Club. I was coaching U19 boys in the most dangerous neighborhood in America, Orange Mound. It's got the highest murder capital rate. but I was really optimistic about the opportunity. I was stepping out of my comfort zone, and I was like, this is going to make me a better coach. This is going to make me a better person. Um, but not long after I got there, I had a tremendous panic attack where I just started gobbling up all of my medication, like dozens and dozens and dozens of pills. And I tried to drive home to Connecticut, 1,700 miles. I didn't make it that far. I had to get flown home, hospitalized for 3 days with severe serotonin syndrome. Um, and I was so lost after that, so suicidal. I would try my hand at stonemasonry because my best friend had his own company. Those were on the good days when I was able to get out of bed. And I'm thankful for him because no one else wanted to hire me. No one else was really supporting me at that time. He didn't care that I didn't understand his directions from time to time. He didn't care that, I wasn't the same me that he had always known. He didn't care that he was losing money on projects because he was going to pay me anyways. So I was touched by that. But, we realized that I really needed some serious help by that point. So, my psychiatrist gave me some coaching. I went to the ER and I said, look, all I want to do is kill myself. I've tried before. I'm going to try again. Can you help me? And so they put me in what they called the purple pod wing of the ER, which is pretty much just for the people they don't really want to deal with, homeless people, schizophrenics, narcissists. And it was a really noisy place. I had a curtain around my bed, but since I was suicidal, they wouldn't let me close the curtain. And after like a few days, I finally got the call that I was gonna get transferred to the Institute of Living, which is one of the oldest insane asylums in America. Um, and that was kind of an interesting experience. They have a beautiful campus, like acres and acres of oak trees in the middle of a busy city. Um, and I got to kind of ride in a golf cart, because the ER was across the street. And that's where it all kind of started. That's where I got help. I had spent years and years kind of resisting help. And, at that point, I was throwing the white flag up in the air. And I was like, look, I'm either going to die or we're going to figure something out. So it's worth it to try.
When in life did you kind of come to grips with the reality that you face and the cards that you were dealt, as opposed to maybe saying like, "Oh, that's not me. That's something different. I don't like there's no point in acknowledging it because I know that's not who I am." I'm curious when that kind of like I don't know, intersection for you was where
Yeah.
this like, you know what? This is my reality and I'm gonna have to own it.
Yeah, right. Like, after I had gotten institutionalized and got that job again and started playing rugby again, um, it was like I was living two lives. I was really trying to hide who I really was from the world. And I was ashamed. But when I had that manic episode, when I got hurt, the first thing I did, I was like, look, guys, I just ruptured to all my teammates on the rugby team. I was like, look, guys, I just ruptured my second patellar tendon. The first time I did this 8 years ago, um, it led to 7 years of suicidal depression, undiagnosed bipolar. And, I'm really thankful for this community because, I'm going to stick around whether I'm injured or not, because this has helped me. And so admitting to that rugby team was kind of the first step in becoming true to myself. And then from there, it was when I started writing my book, when I was finally like, there's nothing to be ashamed for. Like, you're going to step up and you're going to speak your truths to the world. And they're going to make judgments, but the people that matter are going to be the ones who understand and have empathy for my situation. That whole process of becoming authentic, um, that's the biggest blessing I have, right? It is so hard to hide yourself from the world, and it is so liberating to finally, reveal everything that makes you you, that makes you beautiful.
I think it's kind of funny that you say it's hard to hide yourself from the world when from my perspective, majority of people actually do hide themselves their whole lives. Like they're a different person in public and who they are to a person than they are when they're by themselves with their own thoughts. So it's a very interesting perspective to hear you say it's hard to hide yourself, your true self, authentic self, where I think a lot of people would benefit from not hiding themselves and being authentic no matter where they are. So it's very interesting to hear that from your perspective. I don't have
Maybe
a question there,
I've
but
got
Oh,
a
sorry.
yeah.
no,
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 you
it's Banko, I think you're right. I think that is a good point. Like it requires I think it requires whether it's a traumatic experience or a life-changing experience, much like Tyler cited, to recognize that holding in is actually more difficult. Like I could be happier, I could be more free if people actually know who I am. So it probably is that experience that has given Tyler the thought that is so counterculture to what we see constantly. And like Tyler, I don't want to speak for you on that, but maybe this is the bridge question from what Banko is leading to. Do you think that is a fair assessment? Like what do you think has enabled you to find that freedom that not everybody else has? You have discovered something in your life to enable you to have satisfaction or happiness or a purpose that I think so many people are still chasing.
Yeah, I mean, look, like I would have never come out as bipolar or told the world, what I go through if it wasn't for that manic episode that made me start writing, right? So I was gonna stay in the dark. I was gonna stay ashamed. But then once that kind of happened, when I was out of my mind and actually just went for it, whether it was divine intervention or not, it was just such a release of um like getting rid of all the uncomfortableness that comes with like just not being true to yourself. So, you know, it really was transformative for me. Like I think anybody who's in the public eye, or does the things that I'm doing, can relate because my life is just so totally different. And, I wasn't proud of myself before, but now I am. And so I just think that, I mean, you're right. Like so many people just hide, whether they really have, what I have or not. Like most people just are scared of things that are different, right? I see it in the cybersecurity industry. I, I started being vocal on social media and sharing my story. I filter it a little differently, depending on the platform. But when I came out with my book on and posted it on LinkedIn, I thought I would have tons of support, but I was getting like 3 or 4 likes. And the reality is that like most people in corporate America, they put on that suit, they put on that persona, and they don't want anything that's different. It makes them uncomfortable, right? And so that was difficult. But the people on more personal social networks like Instagram have given me so much support and so much, you know, um, momentum behind what I've been doing that it's just like I know what I'm doing is the right thing. And so if people don't want to admit to themselves or they're, afraid of the realities of the world or scared of something that's a little different, like that's too bad for them. They could really use some empathy. They could really use some different thinking, right? So many people they live in their tiny boxes. They've got their briefcase, they go to work, they go home, They live a comfortable life and they're afraid of what's uncomfortable.
I have a question that shifts the focus just a little bit for a moment. I would love if you could go into your own personal experience with what you deal with from a mental illness perspective versus what society's stereotypes of bipolar disorder look like. And I know the issue or the actual diagnosis of bipolar disorder can look different for different individuals, but maybe if you could comment on like what pop culture shows or when they show it in movies of those who are suffering versus like your own reality.
Yeah. Well, the first thing I want to say is that people with mental illness, people with bipolar have superpowers, right? We have a lot of stuff that sucks about the life that we live, right? Manic episodes can ruin everything in minutes. Um, Depression can get you killed. 45 seconds for asphyxiation, doesn't take long. But despite those things, like we have a heightened level of creativity, we're more curious, we have more empathy, we um have more objectivity, like we're able to see both sides of the fence easier because we kind of have that split personality a little bit. And like I said, when you're manic, you can no longer care what other people think. Your mind can work really fast. Your words can move a million miles per minute. Um, and you can take risks, right? Um, you know, Vincent Van Gogh is a good example. He was a manic depressive, suffered his entire life, and he he left a mental health hospital and went away to Saint Remy, which was a small village for artists. And he spent the next 2 months painting a painting a day, masterpieces, all of them, 60 paintings in 60 days. And at the end of that 60 days, he went out and he shot himself in the head. And that was it. But, his mania gave him the ability to become someone that we talk about today, right? He achieved so much in his short time here. And he had those blessings, but he had those curses, right? Bipolar people can do anything. Winston Churchill was a bipolar, you know? Um, so for everything that we go through, there's a whole lot to be thankful for, right? Like that 1 year that I spent just reading in my room, reading 300 pages a day, that made me a smarter, empathetic, knowledgeable person who's able to write a book, who's able to write all kinds of different things, and that all came from the loneliness I felt from the outside world, right? That was a superpower. That year in my bedroom doing nothing but reading, that was a superpower. So I do think that like, people see it on TV, they see Charlie Sheen, they think we're always unhinged. You know, I've only had one manic episode since I was institutionalized. So for the most part, 99.9% of my life, I've been stable, right? I deal with shit that other people don't have to deal with, substance abuse, depression, but like I've been stable. I've been a normal person. People see, Charlie Sheen go crazy or Kanye West or Delonte West, who's homeless now. And they're like, wow, like bipolar is a death sentence. They see, I have trouble in relationships. Women see that, the marriage failure rate for bipolars is 90%, and they're not willing to take a chance. But, everybody has it manifest in different ways. And, if I was stable enough to write a book, I'm stable enough to hold a relationship. I like to think anyways. So yeah, there's a lot of nuance to this disease, but ultimately I'm actually thankful that I have it because it gives me a perspective on life that I wouldn't normally have, like as a white rich kid. I've struggled. You know, W.E.B. Du Bois is my favorite writer. Was. He wrote The Soul of Black Folks. It was about the Reconstruction era of, after the Civil War, when Black folks didn't have a job, they didn't have money, they didn't have any assets, they didn't have an education, and they had no means to get any of these things, right? But through that came some exceptional humans who beat the odds, who made a name for themselves, made a living for their family, and, they could work really, really hard and achieve all this, but it could come crashing down in a minute by some bigot or some racist, right? And in a way, being bipolar is similar to that. I'm not saying that it's on par because what they went through is worse than what I've gone through, but you know, we have to overcome a lot of obstacles just from the stigma, right? It's not on our skin, but when someone knows that you're bipolar, there's going to be judgment, right? And so that's made me work all the more harder. When I'm sane, you know, I think to myself, well, I don't know how long this is going to last. So I need to make the most of it, right? And that's why I've been so, you know, that's why I've done so many different things in my short lifetime because, I felt like I needed to because I didn't know when it was all going to end.
And oh, Banko, you go ahead because I have a topic changing question.
Okay, this is still on par with this. One, I want to say I actually didn't know that about Winston Churchill. So I definitely learned something today. And you kind of answered the question already for me that I was going to follow up with. And I believe they've asked Kanye this question and some other people with the disorder, if they could change it, would they and not have the disorder? And it sounds like the answer is no, because you wouldn't have the life and the experiences and the abilities that you've had. But I want to relate it back to the first knee injury with rugby because I feel like that's when the realization started to set in, the depression started. Yes, the injury probably wasn't the best thing in life, but now looking back on what it's brought and the realization and your life and the awareness of your life, would you undo that first injury and kind of just like if you could go back, say the injury doesn't happen and your rugby career does go professional and you go that route, like would you change that?
Yeah, I think about that a lot because that was my dream. And, I really did think that I could make it. Major League Rugby didn't start in America until 2018, which was 4 years after I graduated college. Um, but when I was in college, I made kind of the highest level that you can play at. I played for a premier team that had guys from all over the world who had represented their countries. And I could play with them. The adjustment of like speed was, a little jarring at first, and I made myself feel embarrassed a couple times, but like my ball skill and my handling was as good as anybody out there. And, so I do think about what could have happened. Um, but my story has been priceless, right? My story has made me, it's like a block of marble that just gets chipped down and down until it's a beautiful sculpture, right? You only get that beautiful sculpture by chipping away at, your body, right? Going through hardship. Hardship makes a person who they are. I'm proud of who I am. I'm proud of the empathy I have. I'm proud that I wrote this book. I'm proud at how mature it's made me, right? I don't want to brag, but I'm wise beyond my years because of what I've been through. And, would I take it all back to be a great rugby player, but also a fool? No, right? I'm still chasing my rugby ambitions. I'm not going to make it, right? I have two ruptured patellar tendons. I'm 32, going on 33, and I have a mental illness that, has me living a lifestyle that's not great for professional sports. But I'm going to keep trying because it's my journey, because I feel like I'm as good as anyone at my level right now. I feel like everybody who comes and sees me play, you know, can see that I'm the guy, right? So I'm still chasing it. I'm just chasing it with some more baggage, but that baggage has made me who I am, and I wouldn't change that for anything.
I I'm glad that we kind of went down this route because I was going to shift it not as much to rugby, but I was going to go beyond the book and beyond bipolar for a little bit. I was going to talk about the crypto and the cybersecurity world, but now that we're on rugby, what was your original exposure to rugby? Why, like, how did you get involved in rugby? Were you playing other sports when you were young? And yeah, talk us through the athletic journey. So
Yeah,
even if I can call a quick timeout on my own question, Tyler, both Banko and I were college athletes ourselves. We were baseball players, and part of the start of this podcast for us was even talking to a lot of athletes and having them share their journeys. If you couldn't figure it out by our crappy pun or title, T work is also supposed to be like the baseball equivalent of just doing the little things every day to become successful. Like, what does your routine look like? So this did start with a small little sprinkle of sport in mind. So if you want to jock out for a minute and talk as much about your athletic trials and tribulations and journey, I'm all ears. Let's do it.
yeah, sure. My older brother was not an athlete. He was a bookworm, and now he's a lawyer for the state of Connecticut, so it's certainly worked out for him. But for me, I was never a good student, and I turned to sports at an early age. Football was my main sport. In high school, I did football, swimming, baseball, and track. And I went to the number one worst rated high school in the state of Connecticut, Wyndham High School. It was inner city. It's been known as Heroin Town, USA by 60 Minutes. Um, Majority Hispanic. There was a daycare in the school. So I was a little out of place as the rich white boy, but I was able to become the captain of the football team my senior year. I was small. I didn't have my growth spurt until college. And, I wasn't as strong as like a captain of a football team should be. But people, loved my energy. They loved my leadership. And, I was the starting safety. I had a lot of interceptions. I hit really hard. And I was also the long snapper. Um, to take a step back, my dad played rugby for many, many years, and so I always had a ball around the house. But in Eastern Connecticut, there's no youth rugby. If you go to like Fairfield County, it's the biggest hotbed for youth rugby in America, but my side of the state just didn't have it. So I was a long snapper, and when I got to college, I gave rugby a shot. And because of my long snapping background, it made it a lot easier to become really good at passing the rugby ball. And so my first ever drill at my first ever practice, I get the ball in like a 3-on-2 situation, and I whip behind the back to the guy on the wing and he scores. And everyone's like, don't do that. And I was like, wow, I just found my sport, and then I just took off from there. We had a lot of success in college. Um, we won 3 conference championships, went to 4.
Where'd you go, by the way?
Central Connecticut State University.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Blue
And
Devils, right?
what's that? Blue Devils. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Um, yeah, we won a lot. And we played they had like a CT Cup which was all the colleges in Connecticut. UConn was obviously the favorite. My best friend was the captain of the UConn rugby team, and I spent all winter practicing with them. They gave me this shirt that said UConn rugby. And so we went to play them in the semifinals, and I wrote UConn rugby sucks on it, and I wore it in warm-ups. And I scored 4 times that game, had 2 assists. I was MVP of the Connecticut Cup. And that was where the scout from that premier rugby team was at, and he took a notice to me.
Did
And
you win that game though? You scored a lot, but did you win the game and beat UConn?
we won. We beat UConn by 4 scores, and
Okay.
then in the championship we beat another school 49-5. So yeah, we were a powerhouse. Like, we were nationally ranked. We lost in the final minutes to the national champion at my sophomore year, and then my junior year, we were playing the number 3 team in the country for a chance to go to the Final Four in Denver. And I scored twice in the first 5 minutes, and I thought we were about to do it. And they had all these scholarship athletes from all over the country and all over the world, really. And they ended up getting us. And my team had a lot of potential. My senior year, we were undefeated and up 25 points with a trip to go to nationals on the line. And we blew that lead, and that was my last ever game at the college level. So it was a little tough. Like, I really thought we had the makings of like a national championship team, but it didn't work out that way. But I'm really proud of my time there.
Yeah. See,
I'm glad you backed up the. I'm
we
just
can
gonna
be
say,
biased.
yeah, I'm glad you backed up the UConn rugby sucks shirt by beating them. I
Yeah,
thought
no,
you were
I
just gonna
wasn't gonna
glaze over.
lose.
I thought you were gonna glaze over. I did really well, but really our team didn't win the game, so I didn't want to let you just glaze over that. But I'm glad you
Yeah,
guys
yeah,
won.
Yeah, Tyler's not just an Instagram athlete. He's not posting his own stats. We're backing it up with some team dubs. Yeah, so Tyler, it's kind of funny. Like, we had such a serious conversation for so long, and we didn't get to show you this side of ourselves yet.
yeah,
Which I would guess to a certain extent is kind of a life that you live regularly. Like, now that you are writing, you are publishing, a lot of it about is for you likely about the serious professional life. But as you have said time and time again or alluded to, probably the most important thing to you in this world is your love of rugby.
yeah. It's that community. It's the way it makes me feel. I just love the game, and it sucks what's happened to my knees and my mind. Um, it sucks to not reach your potential, but like, I proved that I can coach at a high level too. And, once it all ends for me, that's what the future lies ahead. I think that I can get a lot done. I've got one of my good friends, he's the head coach of the University of Kentucky men's team, and they've won back-to-back national championships. The guy's only like 32, and he's the head coach of 2 championship teams. And so, eventually I wanna fight him. I wanna see him in the national championship and beat him. I don't know what school I'll ever coach, but I'm still accredited. Didn't lose that when I lost my coaching job. So, I'm optimistic about the future.
Is there a dream school, dream job that you'd like to have to run that national championship against your buddy?
I'd love to coach at UConn. It's 10 minutes away from me. They have a great facility. They have a great alumni network with a lot of wealthy donors. Um, they haven't done well recently, but they have the infrastructure to create something big, you know.
Now, sticking on that for a minute, what is the college rugby landscape like as a whole? So my wife played at Eckerd. She was a very skilled player. As I said, she plays for the Savannah Shamrocks team still. She played post collegiately for a little bit, but I know there's like small school divisions, large school divisions, schools that scholarship, schools where it's just a club. Can you walk us through uh, just really how rugby is structured throughout the states?
It's really a screwed up body of organizations. And this was actually one of the things that my crypto startup was hoping to address. Just all these bifurcated, conferences where, for instance, when my girls won our conference championship, there was nowhere for them to go after that, right? It was just the conference and that was it. Rugby was kind of blackballed by the NCAA for 65 years. And, that was because of drinking culture and fraternity type culture. And they eventually relented. I think like when I was a senior in college, they started having NCAA rugby. Except there was only 12 teams to start, and even now, like it's only like a couple dozen. So teams win the national championship. It's like, okay, there's 25 schools, like, but you're right. There's, NSCRO, National Small College Rugby Organization. There's like five or six other, different club groups that kind of are independent of one another. And that makes it really difficult for growing the game because at a high level, it's really difficult for, people to recruit the best of the best if they're not giving exposure to, certain colleges, right? And, that's no good for the players. The players start to realize, oh, there's nothing after college or something, you know, I'm not going to chase this. And at least that was the case when I was there and there wasn't an MLR. It's a little different now, people get drafted out of college. But for the most part, it's just like, how do you identify talent? How do you nurture the game and have teams play other competitive teams that are around their skill level? And so there's a lot of work to be done still. But, just this last decade, like since I was in college, like the game has progressed so much in the United States, and I think it's going to continue to happen. Um, the MLR is great for the, youth involvement, and you've got one of the best players in the world, Marcus Smith from England. He says, "Oh, I want to play for Miami for at least 1 year." Like, so something like that would be huge, but there's still a long way to go.
Is NIL part of the college rugby area, and how do you feel about NIL entering the college realm?
Yeah. I'm sure it is at the NCAA level, right? Not at the club level, so it's limited. Um, you know, Rugby teams aren't going to sell 1 million tickets and generate a ton of profit for their school, but there are donors that can really help things out, right? Like UConn has every resource under the planet because, they have the CEO of a big pharmaceutical company who calls it his alumni. Um, and so I'm sure that there are college guys that, are paid. I think they should be. I think if you excel at something, anything that other people are going to come and watch, then you should be compensated for it. But I really don't think it's impacted the game all too much at the college level.
I want to go a different path if everybody's okay with it.
Yeah.
Maybe the other interest in Banko, I'm sure you're going to get excited about this one given your line of work. Let's go into crypto. So, Tyler, what was the draw to crypto? What inspired you? Did you study finance in college? Would just please take it away.
Yeah, I mean, my background's in cybersecurity. I understand how technology works, how encryption works. Um, I have different values around that. Like one of the things that really kind of puzzled me about, international sales, whether it's cybersecurity hardware or, you know, salt and sugar, you know, when you're working with a company who has foreign locations and you have to ship into this country and you have to pay this value added tax, It might be 25%, it might be 30%. And it's the same product that company's got in the United States. It really makes things difficult to transact. It makes things difficult to transact when people are using two different currencies, and you gotta, worry about, the rate of exchange. Um, and, I've always kind of felt like, globalization seems like a nasty word, a partisan word in some respect. But the only way to increase productivity in the economy is by eliminating friction, right? The more difficult it is to buy something, the harder it is to sell, right? And so the world economy can do a lot better by going borderless, by um, having countries have the ability to exchange, one for one in the same currency. Some of the other values that I like about it, data privacy and who owns your data, right? So Ethereum is like the oil to Bitcoin's gold. It is something that could power the global internet. You would own your own data, right? Like I'm on a social media platform in crypto where if I post something good, people just send me their meme coins, right? They value, like it doesn't matter how many followers I have, they value what I do, what I put out there. And when the
What is
biggest
this? What is this platform? Just out of curiosity.
it's called Warpcast.
Okay,
Yeah, it's a
I'll
lot
have
of
to look
fun.
into that.
Yeah, and it's good to know about, what's going on in the crypto underground. But I found crypto in 2017. My roommate had come home from his MBA class and he was like, "Oh, I just bought Bitcoin for this project." And I was like, "Oh, that's cool." And I got into it. And then, a software engineer friend gave me a book about Ethereum, and that changed my life. And then I fell down into that wormhole. I put all my money into it. I bought a little USB drive that I put around my neck. It had hundreds of thousands of dollars on it. I started making NFTs. I became the marketing manager for a meme coin called Grimace Coin. I went viral with a TikTok video. Um, and so yeah, it was, I still sell like Ethereum domains. I sold one the other day. But it's much more passive at this point for me now. I was really thankful at like the bull rush that crypto had this past fall. Because that was right around when I was finishing my book and I hadn't worked in a while. And, I had owned that social network platform's coin for a while, and that went crazy. It went up like 2000%. And so I was able to pay for a PR firm. I was able to pay for, better editing and, advertising and stuff like that. So, I've lost everything in crypto, and it can be really distressing. What I learned is that you could be right about something, but if you're wrong about the time, it doesn't matter, right? You can't overextend yourself, and I wanted to get involved. So I started the cryptocurrency project. Basically, what it was a way to change decision making across an organization, right? The best example I can give is, the bullpen catcher on a baseball team might know all the pitchers really, really well. But is the manager going to ask his opinion in the ninth inning who should go in? No, right? What I was trying to do was basically, if you had certain verifiable rugby credentials, you would have a certain amount of voting power for different things like who makes a roster and stuff like that, right? Players are rewarded in tokens, fans are rewarded in tokens. Um, there's a metaverse platform where, hopefuls can post their highlight reel, or people can sell their tickets or fan gear, and kind of really just take the fan player team, connection to the digital age. So I had a lot of like support. Like I had a girl who played on the Mexican national team. I had that coach from the University of Kentucky. I had some UConn finance bros who had played rugby and, knew kind of how to work the finances. Um, so it was really embarrassing when I lost that $450,000 because, you know, I I ruined my credibility by announcing it to like crypto Twitter. Nobody wants to invest in the guy who just lost $500,000. So I kind of shied away from crypto for a while, but I'm glad it worked out this time, this past fall.
I was gonna go. This was gonna be my area for the fun question towards the end of the conversation, but this leads to it anyways. Um, since you're back in crypto currently, we did have the initial pump from the election and everything over the last 3 months, and now we're having all these good announcements. Somewhat, they're a bit delayed from what people were expecting with the Trump administration coming in. What's your viewpoint on the current crypto bull market? Are we out of it? Are we still in the middle of it? What's your kind of viewpoint on the current environment?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we're not at the point where, you know, 25% of global transactions could be digital. We're not there yet. The infrastructure is not really there yet. It's going to be 5, 10 years, definitely. Um, there's still the stigma of like SBF, Sam Bankman-Fried, who, by the way, I'm a supporter of. Um, the guy made a mistake, but if he hadn't gotten in trouble, his investors would have about 6 or 7 times what they lost right now. And he paid everyone back, so it's a victimless crime. And he's got mental illness. The guy's autistic, he's possibly narcissistic, so you can't really fault him for that. But it definitely, he was the guy that was lobbying, Congress and the president. He was donating all this money. And to have that kind of face of crypto, the guy on Forbes magazine become, a felon with 25 years of prison ahead of him, that really ruined the credibility for the industry for at least until now. I think it's going to keep building. I think, you know, the US is the largest global financial market in the world. And, it's like 25% of the money, but only 5% of the crypto. So now that we have, an administration that is friendly towards crypto, now that we no longer have an SEC chairman like Gary Gensler, who's anti-crypto, um, we can have the policies in place that companies can finally succeed or at least know where they stand. Because it's like, again, with Sam Bankman-Fried, yeah, he did something wrong, but there were no rules. No one gave him any rules to abide by, right? The SEC just kept kicking the can down the road, and they said, we're not sure if, Solano's an asset or what. And they just didn't have any clarity, so he took advantage of that, right? You can't fault the robber for stealing from a safe that was wide open, you know? Um, so yeah, I think, I'm still optimistic about it. I still put all my free capital into it, in a more safer manner now. But yeah, I'm patient. I don't check it often. I check it every few weeks. Every now and then I get a sale of an NFT and that feels good, but yeah, it's not at the forefront of my mind anymore, which is it's nice to not have to stress about it.
Yeah, I should probably take note of that and not check my exposure every day, incessantly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to step back on two things in particular. I want to call them out. One, I think you are onto something with this decentralized rugby concept and empowering more decision makers. I really like the empowering more decision makers concept. That resonates with me because yes, there are often people who are well positioned to make decisions that don't have the opportunity to do so. So empowering, really power to the people in a sense, to give people with a background or information or education the ability to make decisions and impact a team or a result sounds extremely promising. It sounds like a unique fan experience to me. So this is something that I'm incredibly interested in. Now I feel like we could have a whole follow-up episode, just you taking us through your business proposal on this. But the other thing that I wanted to make mention of is the exact thing you said of being right, but you could be wrong on time. I think that's kind of the perfect parallel to life in a sense of everything you were dealing with the crypto world and then just what you live on a daily basis. It doesn't matter, I guess, if you think you're correct or if you know you're right about something, if the people aren't around you, don't agree with it or whatever, like it's wrong timing. It sucks to suck, but that's kind of the issue that we're dealing with regularly. Now, for my fun question, Banko, we should probably name this as a segment more than anything else, rather than we're actually like winding down and just need to ask a couple fun things at the end. Tyler, you mentioned
Agreed.
your dog early on. I see a picture of your dog over your left shoulder. I'm assuming that's your dog. I
Yeah.
would love if you could take a couple minutes and tell us everything there is to know about your dog.
Yeah. She came into my life when I needed her most. I I had quit that job where I made a quarter million at 26. And, at that point, my parents really knew there was something wrong with me. We couldn't pin it on anything. Um, so one day my dad just came home with this little Bernedoodle puppy. And, I think he wanted to not only give me a friend, but, a responsibility that would keep me going because I was in a dark place. Um, and we had some bumps and bruises. She's rambunctious, but Um, she sleeps in my bed every day. I love taking walks with her and cuddling with her, and she's really a great dog. She's about 64 pounds now. Her name's Betsy, by the way, and she's 5 years old, which is crazy. It feels like just yesterday she was a puppy. And we have my grandpa's old dog who's 15 now. She's a tiny little half King Charles Cavalier, half poodle. And they're like two peas in a pod. At first, like the older one was a little jealous of Betsy's attention, but um it's just great to have them both. It's great to have a companion. When I was real suicidal and I wasn't leaving bed much, like, she gave me something to um get up for. Like I had to take her for walks. And my parents are in Florida a month a year, so it can get kind of lonely. They're in Rhode Island all summer, so that can get lonely. But having a best friend is it's really great, and she doesn't judge me. So
Dogs are the best.
hmm,
That's yeah. Maybe we should just completely pivot and just have something called "Dogs Are the Best" and only talk
I'm
about
sure.
dogs. So Banco, we'll add that to our list of future podcast endeavors.
That might be a requirement for every guest. Do you have a dog? Yes or no? If it's a no, you can't be on our show.
Yeah, yeah. That's probably a good barometer for us. Yes.
Uh, I'll just jump in, Tyler, and just say thank you for joining us today. I really enjoyed our conversation. I just want to give you one last chance. Any last thoughts on your mind that you didn't feel like you got to share? Tell the listeners that you wanted to share today. Go ahead, speak,
Grab the book and
promote
plug
your
it
book.
too.
Yeah, go
Yeah.
ahead, plug your book, your social media, etc. Whatever you want to say, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. I had a lot of great time being with you guys. So yeah, check out the Maniac with No Knees. It's on Amazon. It's on a couple other platforms. I'm coming out with the audio book. Hopefully it'll be approved in the next couple days. So that's exciting. You can visit my website, tylerkania.com. Last name is Kania. And besides that, like, pretty much every day I publish a short essay to Instagram. Um, sometimes about suicide, sometimes about addiction, all kinds of things. Sometimes about just like, I'm apolitical, but I do like to kind of weigh in from time to time. And so I mix it up with my different, topics, but that's kind of ground zero for me sharing my writing. And you can follow me at Tyler_Kania. And that's pretty much it. I really appreciate you guys having me today.
Yeah, absolutely. No, we appreciate your time as well. We'll put all of those in the show notes as well, so it makes it easier for the listeners to find you as well and your book and everything like that. Again, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing your story.
Yeah, thank you. This has been great.
I before we let Tyler go, I gotta shout out two things that are absolutely terrible on our part, Banko. I
Oh no.
naturally looked up The Maniac with No Knees on Amazon. So first off, people, paperback $11.99, hardcover $15.99, very doable. Now, in the description, Tyler says he uncovers a major tech scandal and survives run-ins with the Boston Mafia. So this is 100% on us for not
That's why
talking
you have to
about.
read the book.
Yeah,
No,
yeah,
no, 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 no. It's a promotion for the book. You can't share the story here. Go get the book and you get to hear the story. It's
all right.
sales. This
There's
is
a
what we're
lot more
doing.
too. Like I'm telling you, I've lived an extraordinary life.
It sounds like it. But yes, it
Yeah,
is on us for not even being aware of that 100%.
yeah. Poor. We talked about three things the entire episode. Well, Tyler, thanks again for hanging out with us, man. This was a fun morning for sure. Hopefully you got what you need out of it. And to all the listeners, thanks for hanging out with us. Listen to Banko's outro. If you want to get involved, you know how to reach out.
Hi everyone, Grant here. Thanks for tuning into the show. If you could like, share, and subscribe, we'd greatly appreciate it. Also, if you think you or someone you know has a good life story to tell, we are always open to guest suggestions. You can send those suggestions to our email, tworkpod@gmail.com. Thanks again for the support.